It was a Monday morning, September 13th, 1982. A winding mountain road in Monaco. A Green Rover 3500. A woman who had once commanded the attention of every room she entered, sitting behind the wheel, saying nothing. Her daughter was beside her, 17 years old, heading to Paris for school. The chauffeur had offered to drive. She said no. A few miles from the palace, the car began to accelerate. On a bend that required a 150-degree turn, it went through a retaining wall and fell 120 feet down the slope below. There were no skid marks. The brake lights never came on. By the following morning, Grace Kelly was dead. She was 52 years old, and the world that had spent 30 years watching her, first as Hollywood's most luminous star, then as the Princess of Monaco, was told almost nothing. The palace announced broken limbs, stable condition. The hospital's chief surgeon called those announcements, publicly, garbage. The truth, as it so often was with Grace Kelly, remained quiet. Most people know the name Grace Kelly. They know the image, the cool blonde, the Hitchcock muse, the American actress who became a real princess, the woman who turned restraint into a force that entire rooms could feel before she spoke a single word. But the image and the truth are rarely the same thing. Behind the composure was a woman who never fully belonged anywhere she lived. Too artistic for the family that built her, too composed for the Hollywood that tried to own her, too American for the court that was supposed to embrace her, and too honest, in the end, for the fairy tale the world needed her to perform. This is not a story about a girl who found her prince and lived happily ever after. This is the story of a woman who, at the absolute peak of her power, made a choice, and then spent the rest of her life living with what it cost. Philadelphia, 1929. There is a particular kind of pressure that comes with being born into a family of achievers. Not cruelty, not neglect, just the slow, relentless weight of expectation with no clear shape. Because when everyone around you has already done something extraordinary, ordinary is simply not an option. The Kelly family understood this better than most. Grace Patricia Kelly was born on November 12, 1929, at Hahnemann University Hospital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The third of 4 children, the middle daughter, the one no one quite knew what to do with. Her father, John B. Kelly Sr., was not simply a successful man. He was, in the truest sense of the word, a monument. An Irish immigrant son who built a brickwork empire from nothing. A man who won 3 Olympic gold medals in sculling, 2 in Antwerp in 1920, 1 more in Paris in 1924, making him the first triple Olympic champion in the history of the sport. He ran for mayor of Philadelphia in 1935 and lost by the narrowest margin in the city's history. During World War II, President Roosevelt personally appointed him as National Director of Physical Fitness. His brothers were equally formidable. Walter Kelly was a celebrated vaudeville actor who worked with MGM and Paramount. George Kelly was a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright and director. This was the family Grace was born into. And from the very beginning, she didn't fit. Her father had specific ideas about what his children should become. His sons should be athletes. His daughters should be social, presentable, useful in the way that prominent families expected daughters to be useful. Grace was none of these things in the way he wanted. She was quiet where he wanted confidence, artistic where he wanted practicality. She spent hours reading alone. She modeled fashions at local charity events with her mother and sisters. She performed in local theater productions at the age of 12. She studied plays the way other children studied for examinations. She was drawn inexorably toward the stage, and her father thought acting was, in his exact words, a slim cut above streetwalker. She graduated from Stevens School in 1947. In the yearbook's prophecy section, her classmates wrote something that would turn out to be the most accurate prediction in that school's history. Miss Grace P. Kelly, a famous star of stage and screen. She applied to Bennington College, low mathematics scores, rejected. And then, quietly, carefully, and without her father's blessing, Grace Kelly left Philadelphia. At 17, she signed with the Walter Thornton Model Agency in New York. She modeled for cigarette advertisements, bug spray. She graced the covers of Cosmopolitan and Red Book. She paid her own rent at the Barbizon Hotel for Women, the building her father had insisted she live in, perhaps hoping its strict rules and evening curfews would keep her contained. They didn't. She enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. She had been admitted despite the school meeting its semester quota. Her uncle George Kelly had opened the door. But what she did once inside was entirely her own. She practiced her speech using a tape recorder, working daily to smooth the broad vowels of Philadelphia out of her voice, until what remained was something precise, measured, and entirely deliberate. She made her Broadway debut in August Strindberg's The Father, alongside Raymond Massey. She went on to perform in nearly 60 live television programs, a grueling schedule that most actors twice her age would have found overwhelming. She was, by every account, relentlessly disciplined. In 1951, director Henry Hathaway cast her in a small role in 14 Hours for 20th Century Fox. Her performance was minor. The critics barely registered it. But something else happened. The Grace Kelly Fan Club was established immediately after the film's release, with chapters forming spontaneously across the country. She had been on screen for minutes, and people were already organizing around the idea of her. A year later, producer Stanley Kramer offered her a co-starring role opposite Gary Cooper in Fred Zinnemann's High Noon. She took it. The film won 4 Academy Awards. Grace was cast as a young Quaker bride, demure, measured, still. It suited her. But Alfred Hitchcock, watching her early work, was not yet convinced. He called her performance rather mousy. He said she had not yet, in his view, blossomed. She returned to New York after High Noon, took private acting lessons, worked harder. He would not say that again. In November 1952, Grace Kelly signed with MGM. The contract paid her $850 a week. Considered low, even by the standards of the era, she negotiated the right to keep her apartment in New York. She insisted on time every other year to return to the theater. She knew exactly what mattered to her. Her first major MGM film was Mogambo, directed by John Ford, shot on location in Africa, starring Clark Gable and Ava Gardner, 2 of the most magnetic human beings the 20th century produced. Years later, Grace told Hollywood columnist Hedda Hopper exactly why she had agreed to do it. Mogambo had 3 things that interested me: John Ford, Clark Gable, and a trip to Africa with expenses paid. If it had been made in Arizona, I wouldn't have done it. The performance earned her a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress, her first Academy Award nomination. But it was what came next that changed everything. Alfred Hitchcock had been watching her, not in the way critics watched, not in the way audiences watched, in the way a director watches when he has found something in an actor that he doesn't yet have a word for, something that exists in the tension between what is shown and what is deliberately, precisely withheld. He loaned her from MGM to direct Dial M for Murder in 1954, then Rear Window, then To Catch a Thief in 1955. 3 films, 3 years. 3 roles that would define what Grace Kelly meant to the world. Hitchcock understood something about her that most directors had missed. The tension wasn't in what she showed. It was in what she chose not to. In Rear Window, she played Lisa Fremont, all silk and pearls and perfect posture, moving through Jeffries' cramped apartment like she owned the air inside it. there was something in her stillness that made audiences lean toward the screen, not toward the story, toward her. In To Catch a Thief, opposite Cary Grant on the French Riviera, she wore gold lame and held his gaze without flinching. She was, by 1954, one of the most photographed women in the world. She had not yet turned 25. In March 1955, Grace Kelly won the Academy Award for Best Actress. The film was The Country Girl. Her co-star was Bing Crosby. The role, a woman navigating the quiet wreckage of her husband's alcoholism, required her to appear entirely without glamour. Plain clothes, flat shoes, no silk, no pearls, no armor. She beat Judy Garland in A Star is Born. The woman who had turned restraint into spectacle had just won Hollywood's highest honor for doing the opposite. She was 25 years old. She had been making films for 3 years, and she stood at the absolute center of everything Hollywood was, everything it worshipped, everything it celebrated, everything it reached for, which is precisely when everything changed. One more film with Hitchcock, To Catch a Thief, shot on the sun-drenched coast of France. Her chemistry with Cary Grant so effortless it looked like breathing, the south of France captured in Technicolor like a fever dream. And then, in the spring of 1955, Grace Kelly traveled to the Cannes Film Festival as the head of the United States delegation, and a door opened that she would spend the rest of her life trying to decide whether she had walked through willingly. She almost didn't go. Reports had reached her that the mountain roads to Monaco were flooded. She had been filming back-to-back productions. She was tired. She had very little interest in a publicity photo opportunity arranged by Paris Match magazine. She went anyway. What the photographs captured that day was 2 composed people standing carefully near each other. An actress at the peak of her career, a prince in his formal uniform. What the photographs did not capture was the calculation happening beneath the surface. Prince Rainier III had ascended the throne of Monaco in 1949, under a treaty dating to 1918. If he failed to produce an heir, Monaco would revert to French control. He was 31 years old. The clock was running. He needed a wife. He needed her to be international, respectable, and, ideally, so luminous that the world would be grateful Monaco had her. And Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly needed something harder to name. She was an Oscar winner at 25. She was the most photographed woman in Hollywood. She had everything the world said should make a woman happy. She had been called the most beautiful actress of her generation. She had worked with Ford and Hitchcock and Gable and Grant. And yet, there is a particular kind of loneliness that belongs to women who achieve too much too soon. A silence that surrounds them, because the world no longer speaks to them as people, only as symbols. Grace Kelly was already becoming a symbol, and perhaps, in Rainier, she saw something different. A life that was hers in a different way. A stage with different rules. Or perhaps she was simply 25, and a prince was asking. The courtship lasted 8 months. A handful of meetings, letters, phone calls. Prince Rainier flew to the United States and proposed at Christmas 1955 at the Kelly family home in Philadelphia. Her father, the man who had once called acting a slim cut above streetwalker, was delighted that his daughter would become a princess. The engagement ring was a 10.47-carat emerald-cut diamond from Cartier, flanked by baguette diamonds on either side. It was so extraordinary that during the filming of her final film, High Society, she wore it on screen. The prop was unnecessary. Her family paid a dowry of $2 million. Half came from her own earnings. She signed the papers, she packed her things, and on April 4th, 1956, Grace Kelly sailed out of New York Harbor on the SS Constitution, headed for Monaco. She was 26 years old. She would not make another film for 21 years. On April 12, 1956, Grace Kelly sailed into Monaco on the SS Constitution. 65 friends and family traveled with her. 20,000 subjects crowded the harbor. 1,500 journalists had come from around the world to watch. A helicopter flew overhead and released thousands of carnations and rose petals, which fell across the ship and the harbor and the sea around it. It looked, from every angle, like a fairy tale. The wedding required 2 ceremonies, as Monegasque law demanded. The civil ceremony on April 18th in the palace throne room. 80 guests, representatives from 24 countries. During the ceremony, Grace Kelly's 142 new titles were read aloud. Princess of Monaco was only one of them. The religious ceremony on April 19th at St. Nicholas Cathedral. 700 guests, a wedding gown designed by Helen Rose, MGM's costumer, given as a gift from the studio. Worked on by 36 seamstresses for 6 weeks. 25 yards of silk taffeta. 100 yards of silk net and tulle. Brussels lace that was 125 years old, carefully sewn onto the sleeves and collar. A veil made from 90 yards of tulle. 600 guests attended the reception. 3,000 citizens of Monaco came to celebrate in the streets outside. It was, by every measure, the wedding of the century. And then the doors closed. Monaco is 0.78 square miles, smaller than Central Park in New York. Grace Kelly had given up Hollywood, the most powerful cultural stage in the world, to live in a principality the size of a neighborhood. And from the very beginning, the life behind those palace walls bore almost no resemblance to the one the world was being shown. The Monegasque court was slow, very slow, to accept her. She was too American, too modern, too Hollywood. Women who had been born into European aristocracy looked at this former actress, this woman whose face had been on magazine covers, whose love life had been chronicled in gossip columns, and found her wanting. She had to learn French, from scratch, as a public figure, in a country where every stumble was observed. She had to learn protocol, the precise choreography of royal life, where nothing was informal, nothing was improvised, and everything carried the weight of centuries of tradition. She had to perform a version of herself that was acceptable to people who had already decided she was not enough. She had 3 children: Princess Caroline, born in 1957, Prince Albert, born in 1958, Princess Stephanie, born in 1965. She loved them without reservation. She was a devoted and present mother in a world that offered very few models for what a devoted, present mother who also happened to be a princess was supposed to look like. That love was real. But love does not fill the space where purpose used to be. In 1962, Alfred Hitchcock called. He was making Marnie, a psychological thriller about a woman who steals, lies, and flinches from intimacy. Complex, morally ambiguous, a character who contained contradictions and refused to resolve them. The role demanded everything from its actress, and Hitchcock wanted Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly, who had spent 6 years performing perfect composure for a court that required it, who had folded her entire creative life into charity appearances and royal protocols and palace obligations, who had spent 6 years being, without complaint, exactly what Monaco needed her to be. She desperately wanted to say yes. She told Rainier. The answer was no. Not only from the prince, from the Monegasque aristocracy, from the people of Monaco who had built an image of their princess so carefully, so completely, pure, serene, above reproach, that the idea of watching Princess Grace play a disturbed, complicated thief on screen was simply impossible to absorb. The role went to Tippi Hedren, and some last quiet hope that Grace Kelly had been holding carefully in her chest, went with it. There are many times in my life, she said later, in one of her rare, candid moments, when I could have just given up. She did not elaborate. She didn't need to. She threw herself, completely and without complaint, into what remained. In 1964, she founded the Princess Grace Foundation to support emerging artists and young artisans. Her humanitarian organization, Aide Mondiale, advocated globally for children's rights and gained consultative status with both UNICEF and UNESCO. She co-founded the International Dance Academy in Monaco. She found solace in flowers. In tapestry, she became genuinely skilled at it, creating pieces of real artistic merit. In poetry, which she wrote quietly, for herself, under the pseudonym Stephanie, her middle name. She narrated The Children of Theatre Street in 1977, a documentary about young ballet students at the Vaganova Academy in Leningrad. It was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. It was her only film credit in 21 years. It was not the return she had dreamed of, but it was something. Friends who visited her in those years saw a woman who was, by every external measure, beautiful, gracious, and quietly, persistently sad. Cary Grant came to Monaco. Frank Sinatra came. The old friendships held. She maintained them carefully, the way she maintained everything, with precision and discretion and a composure so complete that it was almost impossible to find the edges of it. There is a particular kind of courage in that, in showing up, every day, for a life that is not the one you imagined, in being present for your children, for your causes, for your people, while quietly carrying something that no one around you is allowed to see. Grace Kelly carried it for 26 years. Biographer Wendy Lee later alleged that within months of the wedding, Rainier had taken multiple mistresses, that Grace had been, in the words of those close to her, humiliated. Whether that is entirely accurate or not, the marriage was, by many accounts, complicated. A man who lived with one foot in the 18th century, who believed genuinely in his divine right to rule, who had told Grace before they married that she was the only person he could trust, and placed the full weight of that burden on her shoulders for the rest of her life. When I married Prince Rainier, she once said, I married the man and not what he represented, or what he was. I fell in love with him. She believed that. I think she always believed that. But belief and contentment are not the same thing. By the summer of 1982, those around Grace Kelly were noticing a level of exhaustion that her composure could no longer fully mask. Her daughter Carolyn would say later, she wasn't feeling too well. She was incredibly tired. The summer had been very busy. She hadn't stopped going places and doing things all summer long. She'd done too much. She never mentioned it or complained about it though, but she wasn't in great form. She was 52 years old. She had headaches, and she was, somehow, still performing. September 13th, 1982. A Monday morning. Grace Kelly and her daughter Stephanie were at the family's summer farm at Rock Aigle, in the hills above Monaco, the place Grace had always found most peaceful, most genuinely hers. Stephanie was 17. She was due to start school in Paris on Wednesday. They had train tickets. The chauffeur pulled around the car. An 11-year-old Green Rover 3500. He offered to drive them down to the palace. Grace looked at the back seat, covered in dresses she was bringing back with her, and said she would drive. The chauffeur offered again. She was persistent. So Grace and Stephanie got in, and the car pulled out of Rock Aigle onto the winding road back to Monaco. About 12 miles. A 40-minute drive on a road that coiled through the hills like something from a film set, all switchbacks and sharp bends and the blue glitter of the sea far below. At some point along the way, Stephanie recalled her mother saying she had a headache. And then, a strange, sudden stillness. Mommy kept saying, I can't stop. The brakes don't work. I can't stop. That is what Stephanie told her sister Caroline in the hours after the accident. That is what Caroline later shared with the world. Stephanie grabbed the handbrake. She said later, "I pulled on the handbrake, but it wouldn't stop. I tried, but I just couldn't stop the car." The car reached a bend requiring a 150-degree turn. It went through a retaining wall and fell 120 feet down the slope below. A truck driver behind them said he never once saw the brake lights come on. When the car was found, the gear shift was in the park position. Stephanie had tried to stop it by any means she could reach. There were no skid marks. The car was accelerating the entire way down. Both were rushed to Monaco Hospital. Stephanie survived. A broken collarbone, ribs, cervical fractures. She was released the following day. Grace Kelly arrived unconscious. The doctors who treated her confirmed, privately and then publicly, what the palace would refuse to say clearly for days. Grace had suffered a cerebral vascular incident, a stroke, before the accident. The hemorrhage had rendered her incapable of controlling the car. The impact of the crash then caused a second, far more severe hemorrhage. She was, in clinical terms, brain dead from the time she arrived at the hospital. The palace, in the hours and days that followed, issued communiques describing broken limbs, stable condition, cause for concern, but not for alarm. Palace staffers were told to continue their vacations. Grace's brother, John Kelly, back in Philadelphia, told reporters he had been led to believe his sister was out of danger. Dr. Jean Chatelain, chief surgeon at Monaco Hospital, told the New York Times that the palace's announcements were, in his exact word, garbage. Dr. Jean Duplay, a neurosurgeon in Nice, was equally direct. The communiques were administrative ones, not medical bulletins. The woman who had spent 26 years in a palace, performing perfect composure for the world. In death, the palace performed perfect composure about her. On September 14, 1982, at 10 o'clock in the morning, the family made the decision to remove Grace Kelly from life support. She was pronounced dead, 52 years old, Princess of Monaco for 26 years, Grace Kelly for all 52. The funeral was held on September 18th at the Cathedral of Our Lady Immaculate in Monaco, the same cathedral where she had married Rainier exactly 26 years before. It lasted 75 minutes. Approximately 100 million people watched on television. Nancy Reagan was there. Princess Diana was there. Cary Grant was there. Standing in the cathedral where he had once made her laugh in the south of France sunshine, watching them carry a casket. Leaders and royals from across Europe, 100 million strangers at their television sets. All of them watching the end of something they hadn't realized. Until that moment, they had been holding on to. In 1956, the same year Grace Kelly became a princess, Hermès renamed one of its most iconic bags in her honor, the Kelly bag. It has never gone out of production. 70 years later, it remains one of the most coveted objects in the world, with a waiting list, with a resale market, with an entire generation of women who have never seen a Grace Kelly film, but who carry her name on their arm. Her style became a template that fashion has been trying to replicate for 7 decades. The white gloves, the headscarf, the clean architectural lines, and absolute absence of anything unnecessary. The way she dressed as though elegance were not an effort, but a decision, made once, quietly, and then simply lived. What she understood, without ever explaining it, was that restraint is not the absence of something. It is the presence of something. A kind of control so complete it reads as effortlessness, a way of being in the world that says, I have nothing to prove, and that is the most powerful thing I can show you. Her charitable legacy endures. The Princess Grace Foundation continues to support emerging artists in film, theater, and dance. Prince Albert established the Princess Grace Awards in 1984, 2 years after her death. to carry that mission forward. Her poetry, written quietly during the Monaco years under her chosen pseudonym, was published after her death. The world was surprised she had written it. She probably wasn't. Grace Kelly spent the first 26 years of her life trying to escape the idea of who she was supposed to be. The girl who wasn't athletic enough for her father. The actress who was called Mousy before she blossomed. The woman who was too American for the court she married into. She navigated all of it with the same qualities she brought to every room she ever entered. Without performance, without complaint, without ever allowing the world to see the seams. That was the cost of the composure, and that was the gift of it, too. She left Hollywood at the height of her fame because she was 26 years old, and a prince was offering her a different kind of stage. Because she had grown up in a family where achievement was the only language of love, and she had achieved everything Hollywood offered, and was looking for the next thing. Because perhaps, somewhere beneath the perfect posture and the deliberate elegance, Grace Kelly simply wanted to belong somewhere. She never quite did, but she was extraordinary in the trying. Grace Patricia Kelly, November 12, 1929 to September 14, 1982. Actress, princess icon. She commanded rooms with restraint, not noise. Some people never need to raise their voice, because the world is already leaning in. If this story stayed with you, if Grace Kelly's life felt like something you needed to sit with for a while, that feeling is exactly why this channel exists. There are more stories like this one. Women who shaped the world without asking for credit. Icons who chose elegance over spectacle. Lives that history half told, and then moved past too quickly. The next one is coming. Subscribe so you're here when it does. And if this is your first time at Timeless Chic Society, welcome. You are exactly where you're supposed to be.